That's because I'm not doing any talking.
Hiya.
Yeah, you are. You're going to talk a bit at the beginning.
Hey.
Hello, everybody. Driving. What have we got? A few more to come, haven't we? I haven't heard of it. Louis should be here, shouldn't he? You say Nicola's not going to be here today?
Nicola's be a bit late. Oh, looks like Phoebe's going to take lots of notes. Big book, the big book. I have a little book. She's got a big book.
Absolutely full.
When I was a student, I used to draw lots of pictures as well, you know.
Not a doodle book.
Oh no! Well, no, just it helped me to remember stuff.
Ah.
Yeah, I could also see where I'd fallen asleep though, because the writing would change.
It's downhill.
Well, do I confess to everybody what I did to my phone this week?
I'm recording this. You just be careful what it's saying here. This is for posterity on Andrew's website, you realise.
Please, what did you do?
Well, I have the cleanest iPhone on this planet because I washed it on a 59-minute cycle. And the worst thing was I realised about halfway through the cycle, and I had to watch it go round and round because I couldn't stop it. But it's okay, would you believe it or not?
That's lucky.
Put it into rice and put it into silica crystals, and it was all right. Oh,
wow.
I'm just amazed it's taken me this many years to do something that stupid. Stupid thing. So
does that take practice then?
Oh yeah. I haven't done anything like drive off with it on top of my car or anything like that. And I know
I've done that.
Things like that. Oh, you've done that one then, Heather.
Yeah, I have.
I haven't done anything like that. My phone stays at home.
Oh, my sister's flushed hers down the loo.
Yeah.
So many things that you can do with your phone, isn't there, these days? Here we go. We've got Leanne, Louis. We've nearly got everybody. Okay, and we know a few are missing, don't we? So, okay, right. I think if everybody turns on, then we'll make a start. Just waiting for Siri to make herself known. Are you there, Siri? And Louis, Cecilia, yeah, and Louise.
Hello.
Okay, hi there. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Week 9. It's crazy, isn't it? I can't believe we're 9 weeks in. It's going so quickly. Maybe it isn't for you, but it feels like it is for me. So Heather's going to start us off tonight just to talk to you a little bit about mentoring. Some of you have already spoken to Heather about mentoring, but Heather's just going to explain a little bit more about what that means and really suggest that highly you take advantage of that, really, because it's a really nice thing to have, and a lot of courses like this just don't have that. So if I can hand over to you, Heather, briefly.
I'm gonna delegate.
I've got one question quickly. Debbie, your screen is really blurry. I don't know if it is for everyone else.
I thought that too, and I don't know why.
Is it the camera?
Yeah, hang on, let me give it a clean.
Sorry, it was just bugging me.
And does Debbie sound quite quiet to anyone else?
That's better,
that's
Debbie.
better.
Oh, is that better?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm really ashamed now. I had a dirty camera. I should have put my washing machine in the washing machine.
Let's not go there.
Right. Okay, back to you, Heather. Can everybody hear me okay now?
It's still a bit quiet.
Am I? Oh.
What did you jiggle before when you had this problem?
Oh, there's Nicola. I just set the sounds. Am I still quite quiet then?
I think it's all right.
Okay. Well, while you're talking, Heather, I'll see if I can find out what's going on.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask somebody who has been mentored to actually tell you all about it.
Oh, that's
so I could pick on Yaz, Claire, Phoebe, Rue, Celia. And if nobody volunteers, I know Yaz will talk.
Yeah, we know she's good for it.
Look, I do it all day long. I'm used to it. It's fine.
Okay, so Phoebe, what do you get out of mentoring then?
Yeah, so it's really good because you can kind of bring any questions for Heather and she will answer you. And she will also just kind of discuss and just say, how are you doing? You get to chat a bit about yourself, which is always nice. And yeah, no, it's good to just bring anything that you're not sure about. And obviously you can talk about specific details as well because we're all in the same group. So that's really good.
Cool. Okay, Claire, anything to add? Is that a no? Because you're muted.
Oh, she's on mute.
Oh, there she is.
I thought that was a really good explanation by Phoebe. Yeah, it's just really nice to have a one-to-one and the opportunity to ask anything. You know, not necessarily in front of the whole group, and get lots of reassurance.
Well, I'm going to have to change how I do this, obviously. Yes, anything to add?
I thought it was really helpful because I was able to ask questions about the coursework without like getting obvious answers and stuff, but it was able to help me understand it a little bit better. And yeah.
Anybody got any other questions? That was the easiest chat I've done so far.
Oh, that's not fair. Is there anything else you can add to that, Heather, that gives people, for those people that haven't had mentoring? Because, you know, obviously I think a couple of people have said that it's nice that you can ask those questions that perhaps you don't want to ask in front of everybody else, or perhaps something you feel you might not have quite caught on to that, you know, probably everybody else is feeling the same, to be honest. But anything else you can say that you offer through the mentoring?
It's not a therapy session, but sometimes we kind of border on it a little bit. So if you're thinking that maybe having a session would help, we can kind of discuss that. But yeah, it's just a place where if you've got any question whatsoever, you can ask it.
And I can only
say, is it once a month you can have it?
Yeah, half an hour once a month, so it's no great commitment. So
and you've paid for it already, you know, so it's almost silly not to do it. And I can only say, and I'm sure you're the same, Heather, that if I'd had that opportunity when I was training, I would have really welcomed it, because I think when you're doing this, there is a point at which you want to say, how am I doing? You know, and you don't always get that opportunity in quite the same way. And I certainly didn't get the amount of practice that you lot will get as well, which is all thanks to Heather, actually, that you do, because Heather innovated all of that. But to get that practice and feedback, and then get that one-to-one feedback in a private space is so valuable. So all I'd say is please take advantage of that, because it's there for you. And you know, Heather can answer all your questions, can't you, Heather?
oh yeah,
Everything.
I'm sorry if I missed it, but when can you book those in, Heather? Is that you probably just mentioned that before, but when can we book them in? Is it a specific time?
Nope, anytime, because a lot of you guys are working, so I'm doing a lot of mentoring in the evening, which is quite fine by me. I live by myself. I've only got a cat to please.
So you could just message you and arrange a time.
No problem.
Thank you.
The cat often makes an appearance as well.
Yeah, the cat's often in there. Oliver tends to turn up. Yeah, Saturdays as well. I'm not.
How can we reach you, Heather? What's the best way to contact you?
Send just an email to the support inbox.
Okay, thanks. I can serenade you whilst you're mentoring me.
Oh, that'd be nice. Yeah, I get to hear the guitar. I'll get mine out, shall I, as well?
Absolutely.
Have a jam session instead. Hey.
I think I'll have one as well, Heather.
What, you want jam as well, do you?
Yeah, definitely.
Strawberry or raspberry?
Okay, has anybody got any more questions before we start, or anything that anybody wants to bring to the table before we get into this week? No? Okay, can everybody hear me clearly now? Because I know you're struggling a bit earlier on.
Still quite quiet though.
Am I? So for some people I am, some people I'm not. That's interesting. But can you? I don't think there's anything I can do at the moment. I can't see what I can do to change it. Can you hear me, Heather?
Yeah, if I have you up fairly loud. I have to have you up louder than the others.
Oh, okay. I would suggest maybe if you want to hear me, turn me up a little bit. That's the only thing I can suggest at the moment.
I'm having everybody else pop up on my screen except for you, Debbie. I don't know why that is.
Maybe it's your view. If you look at the view,
In the top right corner.
yeah. So you've probably got it on gallery, but I might have just dipped underneath or something. Not that you need to.
I don't know.
You only need to hear me, really. Okay, right. I'm just going to share screen and we'll get going with what we're going to do tonight. Okay. Right. Okay. So just running through what we're going to do tonight. Very quick recap on what we've learned in module 3, just really a very quick overview and summary really of what we've sort of picked up from module 3. Going to introduce you to the learning outcomes, an overview of module 4, so what's coming next, which we're obviously going to start today. Quick look at hypnosis, science or art, and views on that. The differences between feelings and emotions, very quickly looking at code of ethics and main duties as a hypnotherapist, which we kind of touched on in some ways last week when we looked at GDP and confidentiality and so on, but just a little bit to add to that, and a little bit about accompanied clients as well. Not in massive depth, because we'll go into that more when we look at children later on, but just instances where you might need to consider whether a client would be accompanied or not. So we'll go through that. Probably the most sort of important part is really starting to dig into more questioning now. Obviously in the last part of module 3, we were really looking at trying to understand, seeking to understand the client and what their problem was, what was starting to be beneath that problem. So we're going to look at something called clean questioning and fluid questioning, which is a really helpful way for you to elicit more information, and I'll explain all the other things that come with that as well. And you're going to do an exercise around that because it's broken down into pieces. So we'll do a couple of exercises tonight, if we can get the time to do all of those, and we'll do some more tomorrow as well in the practice session. Okay, so that's what we've got. Quick summary of what we went through in module 3. Obviously, we really focused on that whole thought, feeling and behaviour loop, and how we quite often are literally going around in this loop. So our thoughts affecting our feelings, which affect our behaviour, which eventually can sometimes just go around that continuous loop. We looked. Sorry, was that somebody speaking? Oh, sorry. We looked at how when people come to see us, they're usually looking to either increase something, stop something, reduce something, and we looked at the different ways in which we could look at that. We looked at how people's beliefs, particularly when they've got limiting core beliefs and so on, can really have a massive effect on every area of their life, and particularly in their emotional well-being and even sort of physical well-being at times as well. We also looked at the massive variety of people really that we can help. So many different issues, but because the more you understand the fact that those issues quite often are surface issues, we can just go down beneath the surface there and actually get to what the real problem is. And we really did quite a lot of that when we were looking at the do want, don't want, or don't want, do want, whichever way around you want to say it. When we were looking for that sort of missing bit in the middle, what are the conditions that they need? What's the real want in order for them to have what it is that they really want to change? So we spent quite a lot of time on that don't want, do want. And I'm sure we'll revisit it again soon in a different way, but with more information to get even more out of that. Okay. What you need to be aware of in relation to perhaps being in a position where you might want to refer. So sometimes you might have a client come to you where really is maybe out of your remit or out of your experience. For example, something like PTSD, there's a lot of people that might really specialize in that area, and it might be something that you might want to refer. But we talked about, where there might be instances where you would do that. We looked at safety, your own safety, the client's safety, confidentiality, a little bit about GDPR, And I encouraged you to make sure that you watch the webinar as well around all of that, which will give you even more information. And that's going to help you to answer your module questions as well. Handcrafting suggestions, which we started on. So starting to put together solution-based sessions which are handcrafted with all that information that you've got from the clients, so that those suggestions are really coming from them. So you're not just giving them a general solution-based script, you're actually helping them to sort of craft their own suggestions for what they want for their life. And we also looked at how we could use this not just in sort of client sessions, but for self-hypnosis, and even for the clients to use that as part of their own self-hypnosis. So that's kind of a quick overview of what we went through in module 3. Anybody got any questions about that before we move on to what's coming next?
Debbie, I still can't hear you very well.
Oh, right. Oh, I really don't know what to do, Siri, because I can't seem to do. Let's see if there's anything up here that I can do to change that.
I've got you on maximum.
And you still can't hear me very well.
Really?
I haven't fiddled around with my controls at all. It's been the same as it was before, and I don't seem to be able to do anything more. Heather, do you want to stop recording just for a second? And I'll see if I can. Good. Right. Is that loud enough or too loud?
That's perfect.
Perfect. Okay, great. Right. So that should stay. Just make sure I don't have to save anything. Right.
Can I just ask a quick question? Has everybody else got like a little box of themselves on the screen? Because that's new.
Yes.
Is that new?
Oh.
Yeah.
No, we've always
I
had a
don't
wee
like
box ourselves.
Yeah, you should always
Oh.
do that.
Mhm.
Only today it popped up with me. It's weird, isn't it? Cool.
There we go. Right. Let's play from current slide. Okay. Okay, can you all hear me properly now? Definitely okay.
Yep, you're fine.
You can record me again now, Heather. I bet you didn't stop.
I've been doing that for a while.
Thanks. Okay, right. So learning objectives for module 4. So what we're going to really kick off with this week, we're not going to do it immediately, but we're going to talk about the fluid questioning process, which is all to do with this clean language that I mentioned earlier on. And we're going to be looking at the 4 different elements of that. So by the end of this module, you should be able to use fluid questioning, clean language, when you're interviewing the client and when they're in hypnosis. So the aim is that the more you practice this, and I'd say even practice it in general conversation if you can, it will just become second nature for you to not think of anything else. You've had an element of it where we've been, sort of talking about what's that like. Just started you off in that. So, it should become something that just becomes the way you interview your clients. So that is one of the things we're really going to focus on. By the end of this module, again, you should be able to carry out a fully complete session with a client that's completely bespoke to them and solution focused. Okay, so including the right sort of language that you're using when you're interviewing them, the induction, the deepener, the release, and a solution focused session which you have handcrafted that solution with the client. Okay, so that's where you should feel relatively confident at the end of this module that you can do that. Next week, we're going to be looking at the Andrew Newton induction and deepener. So it's another induction that you will get some experience from. And also we're going to go back to looking at some of the things that happen to clients when they're in an emotional state. So, to give you an indication of what they might be experiencing. We did a little bit of that when we looked at minimum cues, when you were looking to see is somebody in hypnosis, but it's going to be looking a little bit further into that to see what's going on, what emotional things might be going on there, detecting things like resistance and an emotional response to things. So we're going to look at that as well. Code of ethics, which we're going to look at today, and accompanied clients. And then finally in the module, we're going to be looking at the goal achievement plan and how you can implement that. And you'll be applying that to yourself within this, but it's something you can use with your clients at a later date. So really helping clients to plan for what it is they're trying to achieve. And it's particularly good for people that have got quite a long-term goal, like weight loss or something like that. So that's something else that we're going to be covering. Okay, so that's the basics of what we're doing. So just starting off today, just looking at hypnosis and considering whether it is an art or science, or is it both? Okay, so I've got a sort of a quotation here for you by somebody called James Tripp, who's got, I would say, similar ideas to Andrew in lots of ways. He's quite a fan of the natural hypnosis. So in the case that sometimes you almost don't need to do very much at all in order to get somebody in that sort of state of mind where they can really help themselves, where it's focused and it's emotional and it's relaxed. So his quotation here, if I just read that out to you, is researchers can explore hypnosis scientifically, and that's no bad thing. Oh, we've moved back. Sorry about that. Okay. That's no bad thing, but researchers are scientists. Hypnotists are artists. Researchers are all about eliminating the variables. Hypnotists are all about rolling with them. Researchers are all about protocols. Hypnotists are all about skills. Hypnotism in the real world is 100% art craft, or art and craft. Researchers can discover a lot of cool things that can stimulate and inform the practicing artists. But you can't make science out of art without destroying much of its range and essence. So as a hypnotist, sure, do use science, but connect it with the arts. Okay, so that's his view on hypnosis. And there's a lot of hypnotherapists out there that have written books. People like Roy Hunter, I think, is another one. You know, I think his book's actually called The Art of Hypnotherapy. And I'd suggest you look at James Tripp as well. It's quite interesting, and I think you'll find that the approach overlaps. But it's the idea that yes, it is science, but how you use it and the way you go about it becomes more of an art. Now, this is what Andrew says in relation to his beliefs around that. Is, to my mind, hypnotherapy, hypnosis, and any therapeutic type of work works scientifically, but the application of it is more of an art than a science. Okay, so what he says to us in terms of the training that he's put together for us after his years and years of experience is that he would love to be able to give you that sort of absolute step-by-step process. And that, you know, things work exactly like this and you can just follow this in every situation. But in fact, because everybody's very individual and they have very individual problems and they see the world in very individual ways, that isn't always possible. So all of the information that you're gaining on this course is going to give you lots of tools, if you like, you know, a complete toolbox in order to dip into and handle so many different types of situations. It isn't a case of, right, well, we always do it like this. And it isn't even a case of, well, I've got a client who's got insomnia, this is what we do for insomnia. There are suggestions for what you can do, but it very much depends on the individual. It's all about being a very, very bespoke approach and moving with the client no matter what. And I'm sure you've got that idea by now that we are totally working with the client's belief system and we're working with what it is that individual needs. And what Andrew gives us on this course is a set of principles that you can use, as I said, as a guide to support you and resources for you to dip into in order to help you in that situation. So it's up to you how you use those to some extent once you get out there and you're using your own practice. But every person will be different. So really that's Andrew's view on the whole idea of hypnosis as a science, art, and how we do it. It isn't just there's a set way. And I'm sure you'll see in the group sometimes, especially the big group, that people will be saying, what do I do in this situation? All you can really do is give suggestions around all the different principles and tools that you're getting and work with the individual. Okay. So moving on to feelings and emotions. Now, I almost dread talking about this because it's actually quite confusing to really talk about the differences between feelings and emotions, because the two words are used very much together, very interchangeably to some extent, but they do inform each other. So it's really quite good to understand the differences. Now, according to the source that we've been referred to here, emotions precede feelings, and they're a much more physical and instinctual thing. So very much more, you know, the amygdala's in practice there, the fight, flight that we all talked about, the threat response is all part of sort of making those emotions happen, if you like. So they're much more physical, and they can be measured. They can be measured by what's happening in the body. So if you think back to the threat response, when we looked at what happens, the threat and the stress response, is the body's actually changing, getting ready for that, you know, particular emotion that they're having. So perhaps something like anxiety, and it's actually changing what's happening in the body. So it's easier to measure that, although they tend to be very transient. So emotions are, you know, they're there and they've almost happened before we know it. And, you know, as I said, but it can be measured, but what they do is they precede feelings, and in some cases they will cause them. So it's considered that the feeling is a byproduct of the brain. So it's, the feeling is more about how we understand that emotion. So we're putting meaning on it, if you like. You know, I'm sure you've heard the term, it's not, the world isn't as you see it, it's how you are. So it's how you perceive things is to how you're going to feel. So they're the thing that happens after you've had the emotion. But sometimes that feeling can also create the emotion. So it does, you know, sort of sound quite confusing. And the feeling sometimes, it's about, you know, the sort of the mind making sense of things in sometimes the wrong way, sometimes the right way, but it's quite often subconscious. So it's quite difficult to actually measure that. So it's quite a difficult concept to kind of get your head around, really, the differences between the two. So just a little bit more on that. So just an example here. If you've got, you might experience the emotion of being fearful, for example, in response to something that might trigger you in some way. So say for example that you've got to give a presentation and you're feeling a certain feeling about that, and the feeling you might get might be dread, and it might even be fear, but the emotion initially might be fear in response to that. Okay, so it kind of gives you an idea of how these two things work together. So technically the emotions are more directly experienced by the body, but the feelings are more about a state of mind based on how we make sense of our emotions and how we see it. It also links to the TFB loops that we talked about, that, yeah, as I said, they can go round in circles, the feelings informing the emotions informing the feelings, and so on. Another example we've got here in relation to explaining the differences, if you like, is if you've got somebody that has a feeling of love for somebody, you know, a love for your child or a love for your partner, love for your mother, father, whatever it happens to be, that feeling is just there. You don't have to keep feeling that all the time. So you might not be experiencing any particular emotion at that particular time. But if something happens to that person that you have that feeling of love for, that might create an emotion such as anxiety, fear, anger, causing you to actually take action or behave in a certain way. So hopefully that kind of explains the differences there between it, or between the two. Another quotation here, this is taken from Psychology Spot, which is about emotions and feelings again, is the truth is that we don't react to reality, but to the meaning we give to that reality. And this is what we're helping people with all the time, if you think. It's their perception of what has happened in their life. We're not asking them to change it, and we can't make them change it, but we can help them change how they feel about that reality. So in the way of our expectations, needs and thoughts, they're influencing it. So therefore the emotions are not simply reactions to the environment, but they're also an evaluation of what we feel is happening to us. Okay, so it's as I say, it's kind of complex to sort of look at the differences. And then just one final quotation here, which I think is quite a helpful one, that kind of puts it all together. So feelings are sparked by emotions and coloured by the thoughts, memories and the images that become subconsciously linked with that particular emotion for you. But it works the other way around as well. For example, just thinking about something threatening can trigger an emotional fear or response. While individual emotions are temporary, the feelings they evoke may persist and they may grow over lifetimes. Because emotions cause subconscious feelings, which in turn initiate emotions and so on, your life can become a never-ending cycle of painful and confusing emotions, which produce negative feelings, which can cause negative emotions without ever really knowing why. And I think that's quite a nice quotation, because I think it sums up so much of what we're helping people with a lot of the time. Even if that initial symptom they're coming with might seem to be something that is just quite a surface symptom, that so often it will dig that much deeper, and we're looking at that whole process, if you like. So hopefully that explains the differences between the two and why it's kind of important to understand those differences, because they do inform each other so much, but they are slightly different. Okay, any questions so far? Everybody okay? Yep, okay. This is just really ticking some boxes here in relation to ethics. Obviously, like all professions, there is a code of ethics that are really there to help protect mainly the client, but also ourselves, but mainly in the case of this to protect the client. A lot of it you will probably know, and it'll be quite common sense anyway, but the organisations that you will be accredited by when you finish this qualification, I've actually put the links here, and again you've got these actually in your module. So that's the ACCPH, the NCH and the GHR, which are all there with the code of ethics there. So you don't have to memorise them or anything like that. They're always there for you to refer to. And it's a good idea that as we go along and once you start practicing, that you familiarise yourself with them, but they're there as a as a guide, really. Okay, so it's just, again, it's just a guide to principles to sort of protect you, to protect the client. So just really pointing you in that direction. So just making sure you're aware it's there. Okay. And again, this very much links to what we touched on a little bit last week. We kind of looked a little bit about what your role is as a hypnotherapist, and a lot of this will come into the ethics, but on a basic level, whether you're a hypnotherapist, a coach, counsellor, any form of therapist really, it's all about protecting the health and well-being of the people that you're actually working with. Obviously the care of your patients or clients, whatever you call them, I personally call them clients, are of your, they're your first priority, to provide a good and high standard of care at all times. And you'll all have your different ways of presenting yourself. You're all very different individuals, of course, but there'll be certain standards obviously that you need to keep. Every patient stroke client would needed to be treated with respect and as individuals, as everybody is very, very different. They might have the same problem, but they might have it for different reasons, and they might see the world very, very differently. Professional knowledge, it's really important once you do qualify to keep yourself up to date with anything that's going on, and it's always good to see what else is going on anyway, and not just in terms of hypnotherapy, but in terms of other therapies as well, so you're aware, because a lot of your clients will be coming from other types of therapies and going to them, maybe even sometimes at the same time. Obviously following the law and being professional, and there's a lot of general rules around that, and to be personally accountable. But to go in, as I said, to specifics about any of these things, do refer to those code of ethics, and that will give you any more sort of information. And it may well be that you've got a few questions about this in your module. I can't actually remember if there is. So, okay, another thing to touch on here as well, and again, I'm not going to go into full detail with every type of client with this, because particularly when we talk about children, we do go into a lot more detail about all of the different aspects of that, but there will be sometimes circumstances where your client may need a chaperone or may ask to have a chaperone with them in the session, and sometimes that's essential. So for example, if you are dealing with a minor, or you're dealing with somebody with well, a minor in any reason really, there are certain rules around that which I'll go into more detail with at a later date. So that's a time when you would have to, but there are times when somebody might just ask to have somebody with them. After a certain age, teenagers don't need to have a parent with them, but sometimes they might prefer to. And sometimes that can be good, sometimes it's not so good. So it's, I can see a knowing look on Louise's face there. So sometimes it doesn't always work as well as you'd like it to. I mean, sometimes you can get somebody who's very well-meaning, they're really there to support the person they're working with, but they can actually create a bit of a problem. I mean, Andrew gives an example here where he had a very well-meaning guardian who throughout the whole session was passing notes and writing vigorously and really interrupting with the process. So, you know, that's something where I do believe he actually did see him off the premises in the end. I'm not quite sure how that went, but that can happen. I had a similar instance myself where I had a young boy who had I think it was a bedwetting problem, and both parents wanted to come, which again, Andrew wouldn't recommend. Usually just one chaperone, not two, because they become a bit overwhelmed. And again, it does interrupt with your process as well. But in this instance, we had a father and mother who clearly had marital problems, who hadn't communicated with each other about certain things. And the boy was in the middle of this. And she was very domineering. He was, you know, and I think there was a history with the father with bedwetting as well. So it really needed to be him that was there. And it was quite complicated. So, you know, there are times when you would have to say maybe not a good idea. And I'd say I'd always, when it comes to that, sorry, we didn't mean to go back there. When it comes to that, recommend only one chaperone, definitely not two. But as I said, we will come back to that in a bit more detail when it comes to children particularly. Okay.
Heather,
Yes.
would it be recommended that we get a DBS check?
I have got one, but I work with children quite a lot, and I've worked with children in a teaching capacity as well. I think it's advisable if you want to work with children. But some people really don't want to. They know they absolutely won't. So it's up to you. So I'm quite comfortable with children, and as I say, I used to do arts and crafts workshops with them and things like that. So I've always had a DBS check. So totally up to you as to where you think your business is going to go, I would say. But I think it looks good on your website as well to show that you can do that, but not if you don't want to work with children. So, okay. Any other questions about that? No, I mean, there's chances are there might be a few more things, but some of that we will go into a bit more depth as we get down the line towards children and working with children.
If you already have a DBS check, do you have to get another one for hypnotherapy?
No, you don't. No, I think the best way to do your DBS, I mean, are you on the update system?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you'd be fine
am.
with that. Yeah, I'm on the update system, so I think you pay something like £13.50 a year or something, and they just keep it updated, don't they? So I think that's the only way it's done these days. I did it through a teaching company, I think years ago, but I just update it every year. So yeah. Okay, right. Okay, so let's move on to more questioning and clean language. Now, how many of you have come across this before? Clean language, the idea of clean language. Anybody? Yeah,
I've heard of it before. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a few people that have, and I know when Andrew was sort of doing this in the early days, he'd not really come across it. And came across it, I think, by mistake, and came across David Grove, who's kind of the big name in this, really. He, and as I said, as Andrew says here, it's got nothing to do with swearing. Such, it's more about keeping your language out of the client's experience, so not polluting their experience. So it's a way of kind of working with the client, responding to what they're saying to you, and ensuring that all the information comes only from them. Okay, so you are not putting words into their mouth in any way. It's also very effective because it helps to keep the client within their own experience. A lot of the time what we're trying to do is relaxing them to a point where they can go inside and just block out the rest of the world. And by saying the wrong thing, if you like, and giving them your language or your take on that, you could completely jar them. And possibly affect the critical faculty as well. So it's actually a much more effective way of getting them to stay in that experience, but also to get how they really feel, what's actually really going on in their mind, not how do we think it is. So not how we perceive it, how they are telling us it really is. So it's really, really important. Now, what David Grove says here, he says, by interfering with the client's description of their symptoms, he says that well-meaning therapists quite often rob the clients of the very experiences needed to resolve their unwanted behaviours. Okay, so there's an example here. So if a client was to say, either in hypnosis or even in conversation, because it can be used both ways, and recommend that you do use it both ways. But if he was to say, I'm in a room, the wrong way to respond, or an unclean way to respond, would be, is it a bedroom? Because you've literally put that idea into their head, okay, which could completely take them out of where they are. And also influence how they might be thinking. They might even start to, oh, maybe it is a bedroom, so we've actually polluted that experience, and you've pulled them away from their own. So that could create conflict. So what you really want them to do is recall it in their own way, using their own language and how they see it. So a more clean response would be, what kind of room? So let them fill in the details, don't fill them in for them. Okay, it seems really obvious in a way, but I think so often we want to help and we think we're helping by giving them a bit of a nudge, but they don't need a nudge. We really need them to tell us what they feel, what they see. Okay, we don't actually pollute that in any way. It also helps to avoid things like false memory syndrome, which we will again cover further down the line. We won't go into that now. But if it's coming from them, it's not coming from us. It is their experience, and it's really important to stay within that. Okay, so just looking at this in practice, so when you're interviewing the client, also when they're in hypnosis as well, the aim is to always ask questions using clean language, and what we'll go on to talk about, which will be fluid questioning as well, which is Andrew's interpretation and version of this as well, but to get the maximum information from the client. And you'll be really, really surprised how much information you will get from clients. And it will feel a bit uncomfortable for some of you at first. And I can honestly say, when I first did it, I found it quite difficult, because it wasn't, I'm a natural conversationist. I find it very easy to talk to people, and I want to have a conversation. So initially this way to me felt almost as if I was being a bit rude, but it's so effective, and it really does give you the information that you really want to get. And it does mean that you're not influencing that information in any way. So as the therapist, you're trying to keep your own terminology, your own phrases, your own interpretation completely away from that client's experience. Just stay with their experience. In the same way as you stay with their belief system, you stay with their experience. And as you go on and we put all of this together, you start to incorporate the client's words and phrases in what you say back to them. Okay, so you give that feedback, which again, I think we started to do, some of you, in the DWDW, where people were starting to give words back, repeating what people were saying. And that in itself is really quite powerful as well, particularly for the client. So I'm going to talk to you in about how Andrew does this, because it is slightly different, but it is based on David Grove. So if anybody wants to know more about David Grove, there's a link in your modules, and there's a link here. And he works on 9 standard questions, although there's more. But that's his basis. But Andrew said he found that the terminology was a little bit sort of clunky at times, felt a little bit unnatural. So he developed his own version, which he calls natural clean questions. And they form part of the process that he calls fluid questioning, which is what we're going to learn about. Okay. Ooh, move. There we go. So fluid questioning, this is what clean questioning is all part of, or the natural clean questioning, is the collection of techniques which are listed down here, the natural clean questions, unfinished sentences, client feedback process, and linking phrases. Okay, so the idea is to use this fluid questioning to really get to the client's core beliefs, both in the interview and in the actual session, the hypnotherapy session, without us biasing that in any way. So these are the sort of 4 techniques, if you like, that are part of that, which we use eventually all together. Now, I'm not going to get you to practice them all together. We're going to break it down a little bit. So just really learning each of these techniques so that you can eventually combine them all together to sort of create this really effective way of getting information. And also it really helps to build rapport, because quite often you'll find clients are telling you things that they barely know they're doing. You know, the information is just coming out of them. So to go through each of these sort of almost one by one will really, really help you to just make it become part of how you do things. You know, it will become very, very natural for you. Now, just to clarify, that fluid questioning is quite different from what is known as Socratic questioning, which some of you with a more sort of psychology background might be very aware of, which is much more about breaking down and challenging the ideas that the client might have. So we're not doing that. We're working with their ideas, really. So Socratic questioning is quite different. You're not challenging their beliefs as such. You're actually working with them and you're taking them on a sort of an emotional journey right down into their beliefs and ideas, which are quite often limiting beliefs. Okay, so natural clean questions. So this is what we're going to work on initially tonight. In quite a simplistic way. You're not going to be addressing any issues tonight, you might be pleased to know. But these clean questions that we just briefly touched on are going to be working in conjunction with the client's words. Okay, and these are adaptations to some extent of David Grove's sort of questions himself. Okay, and each element of this goes along conversationally with the formal hypnosis with the other techniques. Okay, so let's give you some indications of what these are like. Okay, now a couple of these are going to be familiar to you already. So here's some examples, and these are the ones that you're going to use tonight and not anything else. You're going to have to be quite rigid. Okay, so a lot of us have been using in what way and what kind of already. Excuse me, my voice is going. But here's some of the examples. So putting them in the context of a conversation, if somebody says something and that means that, or what's that like, what kind of, you're really trying to dig into their experience and their feelings much more by just opening up that question. And what do you mean by? Something we don't tend to say is, how does that make you feel? You might, that's the classic therapist thing that you do here, and how does that make you feel? It won't be very often that you'll necessarily say it in that way. It's more open than that. You might say, are there any feelings or emotions around something? Or in a conversation again, and that feels, and there's like an opening there for them to tell you how that feels. So it's just a way of phrasing it. So essentially, you're kind of asking the same sort of questions. You're just phrasing it slightly differently. I wonder why. So sometimes people will say, and I just feel a certain way. And you say, I wonder why. I wonder why that is. So you're sort of, it's less than why. Why tends to be a little bit too direct in some cases, and almost a bit challenging. So it's being a little bit gentler again. And I'm sure you've got the idea that it is a little bit gentler, this whole approach. Whereabouts, and then all of these questions you'll have on your module notes there, and you're going to be referring to these tonight. Now, here's just an example of therapist client having a conversation here. Again, this is in your notes. So the therapist says, how can I help you? So the client says, well, I've been feeling depressed. In what way depressed? Sort of, you know, low. Low? What kind of low? Like I can't get up in the morning. And what's that like? Can't get up in the morning. It's scary. What kind of scary? Well, feels like I'm a failure. A failure in what way? Because I want to get up and get on, but I can't. What kind of I can't? I don't know. What kind of I don't know? I don't know. It's just like, I don't know what to do. And when you just don't know what to do, are there any feelings or emotions? Yes, I feel really sad, lost, helpless, a scared feeling. Okay, you might now focus your mind on that sad, lost, helpless, scared feeling. Okay, so you would, I mean, not all conversations are going to go quite this quickly, but it just gives you an indication of how that conversation may go. But you're digging into their particular feeling. And at the end of that conversation, you've got that lost, helpless, scared feeling. And you may at that point follow that feeling into, you know, where that takes them in relation to hypnosis and so on. So it just gives you an example of how those particular questions can work. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do in a moment, we're going to try and do, if we can do it in half an hour, it'll be great, because it means we can do the next stage as well tonight, and then we can carry on tomorrow, which will take us through the next stages and a little bit more. So what you're going to do this time, rather than facing an issue or anything like that, you're going to actually just talk to whoever it is you have in your group about a topic that interests them. Okay, so something very general, very light, but the idea is that you must only use this particular questioning process, and in this case just using natural, clean questions. Okay, so don't worry about the other techniques at this moment, just make sure that you're only using those clean questions. Now you might find it a bit difficult at first. It might feel quite unnatural because it might not be the way that you would normally talk, but really try and stick with it if you can, because if you do, you'll be surprised at the information that you can get and how much more information that you get from it. Okay, and it does, as I say, it really does take a bit of getting used to. Although some of you may be more used to this way of questioning, so I appreciate that it may be easier for some than others. So, as I say, light subject, whatever it is that you want to talk about, you know, whoever's interviewing you, it could just be a hobby or something you're really passionate about, really doesn't matter, but the thing to do is just use those natural, clean questions and just see how much information that you can get. Do it for at least 5 minutes, but more if you can. So if you can do 10 minutes per person in this way, that will be really good and really good practice for you to just keep it going using these natural questions. Okay, natural clean questions, sorry. Okay, so you're all clear on what you need to do. Yeah, you've got the task in front of you in your modules anyway, I'm sure to refer to. So remember, really, really important, only use those questions. Okay, so, and no answering any questions for them or putting any ideas in their head. You're not, it's not so much you're having a conversation here, really, you're trying to get information. So it's not about you. So the temptation sometimes, if somebody's talking about their hobby, might be, oh yes, I love that as well. You know, or, you know, I can do that, or I'm interested in that. It's really keeping it very direct to the natural, clean questions. Okay. So as I say, you might start that conversation off by just saying, can you tell me something about whatever it is that they've chosen to talk about? Okay. Okay, so if there's no questions, Heather, if you can put us into breakout rooms.
Done.
Brilliant. Okay. And start thinking about what it is you're going to talk about, whoever's going to be questioned. Okay. We're all going. You're still there, yes?
She'll get there eventually. You got the same usual numbers, 1, 2, 3. I'll have 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, I don't mind. And actually, if, depending on how quickly we get through this, I guess they'll probably want to talk about it.
Kind of got to the point where I felt like I was starting to go around in circles.
Going around in circles. Okay. Okay. Well, I can't. You've got a bit roboty. I can't hear you very well.
Connection keeps cutting out a bit.
It is very. It's quite bad for a lot of people tonight. Actually, we lost Yaz. Yaz dropped off. Hers wouldn't work at all.
Yeah, we lost Bryony some time ago.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Right. So who was I talking to? I couldn't see who that was coming from.
To Rachel.
It was Rachel. Ah, right, Rachel. So you said you were going around in circles. In what way were you going around in circles?
Well, she's not now because she's frozen.
Well, this is going well.
So you can talk to Kate because Kate was in that group.
Okay, Kate, tell me about.
I just felt like out of those questions.
Oh, she's back. No, she's not.
No.
Okay. Kate, tell me about it then. So Rachel said she was going around in circles.
Well, I thought Rachel was really good. So I don't know. I mean, I was the one that needed the most help, or all the help.
Yeah.
What kind of help did you need? Kate.
On every level.
Okay, so how many of you found that quite difficult?
I needed the most help.
I'm really struggling to hear people tonight. This is really difficult. It's all gone. I can't hear anybody else now.
Debbie,
Hello? Ah, Siri.
interesting how with just a banal,
It's freezing.
superficial topic,
Yeah.
it was possible to get so much deep information just using those phrases.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really is, isn't it? I mean, I think there was some great conversations going on where I was buzzing about so much information. I can't, somebody's speaking, but I can't hear.
Somebody's got a slow connection and you're just getting the slow feedback.
Ah, right. Okay.
Yeah, what they're saying. Just a slow
Okay. Okay, so any other comments anybody's got about how that was?
I thought it was really interesting the way in which yeah, the smallest topic can lead to such an expansion in how you navigate yourself through a conversation. And when someone is so neutral, it just allows you to open up so much more than you actually expect.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Okay. Anybody found that really hard to keep to those questions? No, but that's good.
Yeah,
So you're
Kate's waving at me.
Yeah, she did. Yeah, Kate said she needed lots of help. But okay. Well, as I said, we've only got probably 10 minutes left, haven't we? So I'm trying to think of the best use of the time that we've got left. Heather,
Just explained unfinished questions.
Yeah, we'll just go on to that. So we'll go into unfinished questions. I'm just going to share my screen with you, and we're going to then practice on that tomorrow with the other two elements as well. Okay, so bear with me just a second. Right, so we went here. Okay, so we did that. Right, so the next thing that we're going to do, and we're going to pick up on this tomorrow, is going to be unfinished sentences. Now, somebody pointed out, I think it was Rue actually, quite rightly so, that you're probably not going to get as many unfinished sentences on such a sort of simple subject or superficial subject, if you like, because there isn't necessarily going to be that resistance, because quite often when you're having a conversation with a client about something that's upsetting them or is an issue for them in some way, they'll quite often start a sentence and won't finish it. And part of it is because they're kind of like, oh, no, and they're holding back. And that's where we will quite often say, and we will encourage them to finish that sentence. So in a situation like we've just had, where you are talking about something very superficial, there's not going to be as much need. And I think somebody had pointed out that, I think Rue, because you've done the modules, knows about unfinished sentences, said there weren't many of those because the resistance isn't there. But quite often, as I said, you will get this thing with people where they'll go to say something and they kind of backtrack. And as therapists, we want them to go there. And the way that Andrew sees it is if somebody keeps doing this, or they're doing it in any way with the situation they're talking about, he sees it as a flag for, there's something going on here that you need to dig into. And sometimes we want to make them feel better, but actually we need to go that we need to help them to go where they need to go. Okay, so if somebody is holding back and they are not finishing that sentence, we want them to get in there and finish that sentence. Okay, so that is going to be the next thing that we're going to be doing, is looking out, not just using the natural clean questioning, but looking out for those unfinished sentences, because quite often that's going to help you to get down to the next level of whatever that issue may be. Now, at the moment, the exercise for that is going to be, it was going to be superficial, but I'm now wondering if it might be a good idea for us to work with some kind of problem, because I don't think we're necessarily going to get those unfinished sentences in the same way. So I don't know what you think on that, Heather.
We can link it into the one that comes next, using client language, because some people are already doing that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
mix in the third part, and tomorrow we'll practice asking just those questions, listening for unfinished sentences if there are any, and using the client's words, which should be the next be the next slide you've got.
Yeah, no, that would be a good idea. So we'll just put that together that way, I think, because as I said, I think it was Rue that pointed that out quite rightly, that if it's quite superficial, people aren't going to hold back, because there isn't any need to, really, is there? But what's actually happening when a client does that, when they do start to backtrack, is subconsciously they're stopping themselves expressing and saying something. So our job is to get them to do it. Okay, and sometimes that's going to make them emotional. And that's exactly what we want to do in order to be able to help them. So it's not that we really like just making people cry. But,
yes, it is.
Yeah, well, you'll get used to it. so that's I think we'll pick up on tomorrow then, and I think that's a really good idea. But we will work with an issue, but we'll put those things together so that you can start to look out for those unfinished sentences and don't let them go. Okay, so don't let them get away with those unfinished sentences, because they are something there that's there to help you, really, to move to the next stage. Okay, so there's a quick example here of maybe an unfinished sentence. So you've got clients saying, I had a difficult childhood. So the therapist would come in with the clean language and saying, what kind of difficult childhood? Well, it was just that mum and dad worked really hard to support us. Oops, sorry. Finish that sentence. It was just, no, nothing. It was just, go on, finish the sentence. It was just lonely, and then triggers an emotion. Okay. So it's just not letting it go, not being tempted to just make it all okay at that early stage, because you haven't got to the problem yet. So, you know, that's just an example of how that could work. Okay, so that's where we're going to pick up tomorrow then, and do as Heather said there, we'll bring in the next bit, which is going to be the feedback, giving the client's words back to them as well, which I'll go into a little bit more detail tomorrow. Okay, any questions? Actually, you don't want this now, so we'll go back. We don't want that. Any other questions about tonight? Or anything that we've done this evening before I let you all sign off? No?
Speak to Heather for 1 second at the end.
Of course. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's what I would say with this, as I would with anything that we're doing here, you know, practice with your friends, you know, and your family, and you will find you start to do this quite naturally. You're just going to get really, really curious. You just want to know, and start using that line of questioning. You know, don't make this the only time that you're doing it. And we will be putting it all together, obviously, where you will be encouraged to use all of that as part of the whole session. But you know, it needs to be practiced, and we'll practice it here, but do practice it outside as well. And you know, I've noticed a few of you in the group who have sometimes wanted to do a bit more on things. Then, you know, do use each other outside the session where you can, to actually practice these things even more than we're doing here, because, you know, it really is practice makes perfect. You know, the more you do it, the more it will become second nature, and the easier it will become for you to just do it without thinking. Okay, right. Anything you want to say, Heather, before we disappear? She's gone.
No, she's still here.
Yeah, anything you want to add before we disappear?
No.
Okay. Right, you get a mildly early night, 4 minutes early. So, or 6 minutes early, maybe. We'll see you back here tomorrow night then for practice. And as I said, we'll dig into the next bit and we'll be starting to put it all together a little bit more, all of those different aspects of the fluid questioning. Okay. Right, good night, everybody.
Thank
Bye,
you.
thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.